Hi, this is Kit, and this is the third and final part of my Gamora jacket build. If you didn't see it, you should go back and watch the first two parts to get you to the point that we started at this beginning of this video. This is where we left off last time. You can see the finished shrug with the sleeve striping, the custom collar. You can of course see the wrong side of the garment because it is not a lined pattern that I'm building. But from here on, we are making the tail to the jacket. In order to make the tail, I started using butcher paper to create an initial pattern for me to test the fit on with my daughter. I measured the bottom of the shrug. That was 12 inches for me, and I created a 21-inch long tail. And I did have a little bit of a flare to the tail. I want to say it was probably like 8 inches folded over, so 16 inches folded apart. You can kind of see that there. So created a polygon, cut it out, and then once that was completed, I was ready to test the fit on my daughter and do a fitting. I had it pinned to the inside of the jacket, unfortunately, so when she did try it on, she was very careful and stiff, but it looked like it was falling right at this stage, so I had a template to work on later in the day at nap time. With my butcher paper pattern, I returned to the black pleather fabric. I folded the fabric in half, so I'm creating two pieces at once because it is a two-sided garment. You need a front and a back. You're going to see both sides of this. Something else I create, and it's really fast in this video, I create a little brown swatch that goes in the back of the tail, and that is based on some of the cosplay patterns I was seeing, because I'm not actually sure what Gamora's, the back of her jacket looks like. I haven't rewatched the movie. You can see me creating that here. So I cut down the middle stripe by 2/3, took it out of the brown pleather fabric, and then prior to, after I cut it out, I seamed up the edges of the brown, and then I sewed it on vertically to the black before moving to this part where I'm pinning the right sides of the fabric together, and I'm going to sew along 3 sides, so the 2 vertical sides and the bottom of the tail, which is where we're going to land next. Eventually. I guess, yep, there we go. So at this point, I needed to turn the entire garment right side out. I trimmed the corners so I could get a nice crisp corner, and then stuffed the entire thing through the top of the tail, which will eventually be sewn onto the shrug, onto that the top of the coat. So I popped it inside out, and you could see the edges were poofy. So I went back and I sewed along the edge, along that seam, to create like more of a crisp tail. So you can see that here, the tail looks a lot crisper. I didn't actually sew through the bottom of the brown segment. It was just too many layers of leather at that point. But yep, here I am at the final assembly. I pinned the top of the tail to the inside, to the wrong side of that shrug very carefully. And that was all I needed to do to finish this garment. It was a lot of layers of the pleather fabric, so I was pretty careful at this point with my needle and with my sewing and the tension and everything on my machine. And that's something you're just going to have to play around with. So here is the finished coat. Again, it's not lined, so it doesn't look pretty when it's not being worn on the inside of that jacket. But you can see it's all connecting pretty nicely. That tail has a heaviness to it that I really wanted because I do recall Gamora spinning around and swirling and the tail of her coat flapping. So while I'm storing it prior to it being worn, I am pinning the tail into like a curl so that hopefully it does maintain a little bit of a curl forward instead of being awkwardly flat. So here you can see my first fitting with my daughter. What we're doing with the rest of her costume, we don't have the Gamora wig yet, but that's something that we're going to get. And between the coat and the wig and the green skin, that's kind of all you need for Gamora. And her being a 10-year-old little girl, we are not getting a leather corset for her to wear over like loose white fabric. We just found a black tee at the thrift store, and that's what we're going to have her wear. I will try to maybe make a final video that shows her with the makeup on and with the wig, so you can see how everything comes together. But between the wig, the skin color, and this coat, I'm pretty pleased with this costume overall. Now, here is my lessons learned on this project. First, I did mention this briefly in video 1, but I would recommend using a size or 2 bigger than you measure for the shrug. Because this pattern that I'm using, the So Simple Shrug, it's designed for garments with a stretch. Pleather has no stretch. This jacket fit her exactly to the measure, but it's really tight on her, and it does kind of look a little on the small side. It doesn't come around her shoulders very much. I'm not going to remake this coat, but it might be ready for my younger daughter, who's 6 years younger than her, in just like a year or two. So she can be Gamora then. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that you really need to use a heavy-duty needle in your machine. I used heavy-duty thread as well. And that kind of leads me to my last recommendation, is when you are hot gluing seams open, if you decide to hot glue them, do not hot glue in an area that you're going to sew later on. Don't hot glue it near a place you're gonna seam, anywhere that you're going to stitch it together. You don't need to glue there because it's going to cause possible needle breakage. I did not take that into consideration when I was doing those hot glue seams on the sleeves, and those were murderous to try and sew through. So 3 recommendations is, again, go a size or 2 bigger on the shawl that you start with, or the shrug that you start with. Make sure that you have a heavy duty needle to go through these pleather pieces, because in some parts you're going through 4 layers of pleather when the whole thing comes together. Possibly using also a heavy duty thread so that the sleeves can endure some stress and work. And then finally, don't hot glue anywhere you're going to sew. That's all from me. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. I'll try to post a new video soon of my next nap time project. Happy making!